Good evening, everyone. It's Tom Sydney Bushnell, aka Numbers, here from Psych.Club and from the Tom Numbers Show. I've got Rachel Rightside Blonde, and I've got the man with the boots, 107. How are you both?
Doing well.
Great.
Alrighty. So, what have you got for? Oh, before we start, we just saw the soccer match, the World Cup between England and USA, and it was a draw in the end. So I guess there's not too much to say about it other than maybe both teams will progress to the next round. And one interesting thing on numbers before we get into the show is Qatar, where it's being played. And there's a lot of controversy around Qatar. It's been highlighted all over the global press. But the word Qatar is 57, which also equals England, which also equals Tesla. And I was at the Euro final last year when England lost, unfortunately, against Italy on the penalties. But I've been hoping, who knows, maybe England will get through because England is 57 and Qatar is 57. Maybe they'll win. But maybe they won't. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Anyway, without further ado, let's hand the football.
Well, hold on. Let's not leave that too quickly. I want to add one thing. I think this is lost on people over and over again. Is 57 a good number or a bad number? Both sides are trying to own the numbers. There's a positive side to 17. There's a negative side to 17. The Osiris death and resurrection date is 17. 17 is associated with Osiris. 17 is also associated with the 17th letter of the alphabet. It's also associated with the 17th book of the Bible, Esther, all about the flip, the reversal, the victory. At the moment that Esther and the Jews were about to be destroyed by this 17 crew, everything got flipped and reversed, and all the energy went to the positive side. So both sides, just because you hear a number and a reference, England and Qatar and others, both sides are competing for ownership of the same numbers. The devil wants to own on the sixth day when man was created. On the seventh, God rested. 6 is a number associated with man. 666, the Antichrist, the ultimate man, God man in this world. You have to understand that these numbers, while they have significance and import, both sides are trying to manipulate artificially natural numbers for their own use in this magic, in this theater that we are living and working and functioning in. So when I hear number, okay, that doesn't tell me the rest of what I need to know. Both sides are competing to manipulate those numbers to good advantage for themselves. It's like 1111. That's a number of war. 111111. It's a number of global war. And so we see 11s used because why? 11 is the number of discord. 11 is the number of confusion. Why? Because there's 12 apostles. But when Judas betrayed Christ, got his 30 pieces of silver, he left the discipleship and became an agent of the devil himself. 3 times 11, 33. Okay, his 30 pieces of silver dropped the 0 because 0 doesn't mean anything in the language of gematria. The devil had his ultimate due. He took something that was on the good side, co-opted it. The disciples were left in confusion, and he dominated for a period of time in that confusion. There's all sorts of mysteries that are in here that are fun, interesting, exciting. I don't run my life by the numbers, but I am cognizant that the devil himself wants to own and control within the matrix, within reality, certain flow of events to his advantage. And he and his minions believe that by manipulating time and space and numbers, they can control outcomes and magnitudes of events. That's why for example, in England, Big Ben is so important. It's this Osiris symbology in this tower clock that is measuring time. Even the Washington Monument, another variation of the Osiris dildo at the center of Washington, D.C. And what is it? It's a clock in part. It's a sundial. And events that are done in D.C. are coordinated with where the shadow, whether it's from the sun or the moon, of the Osiris sundial clock in D.C. is cast at any given moment at the tip of the point. So they want to control numbers, manipulate time and outcomes for the world with staging and orchestrating events with precision on these timing marks of moments in time, both on the astrology side, star clocks, on the messaging and themes in symbology, the statuesque, the naming of buildings, the shape of buildings, and things like that, like in DC, where you had all 42 gods, the Greek Parthenon, present, watching this birthing event that was 9/11, when Virgo was birthing in the heavens above at the exact moments that the buildings were being collapsed, this membrane between the spiritual world and the physical world, and then the numbers with what they represent and mean, just like 17. So when you quote number associations with words, with letters, with memes, you have to understand that there's a positive and a negative side, and just associating 5 things that all have the same number doesn't necessarily give a true representation of the story. There's a good side and a negative side, and both may have the same number. And the question is, how is that energy going to be used or perceived to be used by either side? Even within what President Trump's doing, the date that he announced that he was running for president of the Republic, apologize, I can't shut off the notices, I apologize. The date that President Trump announced that he was running for president of the Republic, not the United States, by the way, on 11/15 of 2022, when I was out there at Mar-a-Lago and watched the ceremony, what was the significance of that date? It was the 666th day of the Biden presidency. You think that was arbitrary? That was an accident? Are you kidding me? Of course there was a meaning and intent on the numbers for doing it at that exact moment to send a message for those that were paying attention. And then in the language of flags, where I was using Melania while he was the president to send the message of the flags are all different things, especially right now. He literally in every event was sending coded messages using flags if you were paying attention. The literal American flags and other flags present at those events to send a very precise, very calculated message for those that were paying attention, watching this theater playing out in front of you with 3 flags on one side and 11 on the other. And both sides are vying for control of this moment in space and time and the direction of the energy of the country, of the psyche of America in this moment. And this is all a numbers game. Who will own the crowd, the majority of the population coming into the crisis just ahead? If you are too close to 50-50, you have a civil war in America, and many, many, many will suffer and even die possibly in what's coming. If you have the vast majority of the American population on one side or the other, then the likelihood of having a rout, of having, say, civil discourse versus civil war, we can have the civil discourse, but at the end of the day, it will not have much bloodshed or destruction, damage to the economy. But if you have it too close to 50-50, you probably got one huge hell of a mess in America. So moving the dial, getting the numbers on one side or the other of this issue that's going on, that is the most important issue in America today. Those people that think that the election of 2020 is over, in your dreams. We are entering the most critical phase. There's all sorts of stuff in play. Anybody think that nothing happened is just not getting it. Can't help you. Enjoy the show.
Juan, do you still think Trump is going to be arrested?
Yeah.
There's still a
I think
possibility.
there's a fight. I think it's a strong possibility. There's a fight. Is it an absolute? No, it's not an absolute. We're watching chess at multiple levels, and moves on one side are determined by the last move on the other side. And both sides are making very important strategic moves. Look at this moment we're in right now. I bet you most of the people in your audience haven't got a clue what's going on really this exact second in America. Let me read you in. Well, the whole world, let's bring you all up to speed on this. We have what we call a lame duck Congress. After an election like we just had here, 2022, House Representatives, those people are elected for 2-year stints. So they're in office for 2 years as a representative, and they got to go through another election. And so after an election like 2022, a lot of those people are leaving office and not coming back. Others have already been reelected, so they will get to come back, and they're safe for another 2 years. Whatever they do in this last session of the year of this Congress isn't going to change their electoral position for holding office for another 2 years. And I apologize, I got a bit of a virus or something while I was at Mar-a-Lago, so I'm still in the recovery, so I got to take a sip every once in a while or lose my voice. So this last session that's coming up in just a few days is a lame duck. Doesn't matter what they do, it's not going to affect whether they're elected or their position in Congress or anything. So congressional activity during this lame duck period can oftentimes be very bizarre because they don't have to live with the consequences, at least for quite a period of time. And by the time you get out to the next election, it may very well be that everybody's forgotten what you did, or it doesn't matter. History's marched past it. So a lot of times there's a lot of mischief that occurs during that lame duck session that's about to happen. Now, behind the scenes, we've been having a discussion within some of the circles I run in. What's going on with Congress? They have talked about, because of Roe versus Wade and what the Supreme Court did in overturning Roe versus Wade, they want to come in and they want to clip the power of the Supreme Court. They want to use this lame duck session to rein in this court. And so they want to put term limits on Supreme Court justices. They want to circumscribe the power down somewhat and neuter them. They want a Supreme Court that can't outmaneuver them and make Congress able to have much more power. On the presidency side, with the Biden presidency, the crowd around Biden, not Biden himself, because Biden doesn't even know what solar system he lives in, the people running Biden and puppeteering him, they're so livid that they have to rein in the Supreme Court also. So they're talking about something that's been bantied around for years. I remember the first that I heard of it was back in the Reagan era of packing the court, where they would just assign 20 new justices, 3, 4, 6, whatever it takes, to pack the court with liberals to shut down the conservatives left in the court. So you have this attack on the Supreme Court from a couple different directions that's in play right now, this second, in the last weeks of 2022. So how does the Supreme Court, how do the conservative members of the Supreme Court think, act, work to protect themselves? What could they possibly do? So something interesting happened just a few days ago. And when it did happen, everybody involved was like, that's kind of different. Did that really happen? And what it was is a obscure case in Utah surfaced and on the Supreme Court docket. And when I got sent it initially, I was like, this seems unlikely that the Supreme Court would take this on, review this case. I thought, I better double check and make sure that this is actually what it is, because it, sounded almost too good to be true. Conspiracy theory 101, all the other stuff, people sending her out don't know what the consequences, what it is. So, I send it over to a friend of mine who is a, is a constitutional law professor at a major university. First class, top flight guy, not the riffraff. And he's also been a Democrat most of his life, recently became independent because he was so upset on something that happened within the electoral arena back in 2016. But this is a guy that's been Democrat all his life, beautiful guy, good friend. And so I sent it over to him. I says, can you look into this? Is this actually something that's been accepted by the Supreme Court for review? Because this case is, it doesn't seem like something that they would take on. He looked at it initially, says, oh yeah, no, something's wonky with this, doesn't make any sense. I can't imagine they'd take it on. He goes and checks on the Supreme Court website. Oh my gosh. Out of the 5,000 to 8,000 cases that the Supreme Court accepts has submitted to it on an annual basis, they might accept 150 that they look at for review. In a big year, maybe 2 or 250 or something. They just don't take very many cases on. And some of the cases are more complex than others. And so they'll accept it for the justices to review, to set precedents for other cases, etc. Most of the cases that are, submitted for the Supreme Court to do additional review on are DOA. They never get looked at. They just ignore them. And in fact, if something's too controversial, especially in the political realm, a lot of times the Supreme Court will just not even touch it. And so they ignore it. A lot of times there's been stuff in tax law and other things where they just ignored it because it's a tar baby. You try to touch it and it just makes for a bigger problem. So it's even like the Roe versus Wade case. In most eras, the court would never have reviewed that case. And there have been similar cases that were brought that prior courts wouldn't touch. So when they accepted the case and then made a decision on it that overturned Roe versus Wade, that was something striking because so many other people had come with similar cases over the last 50 years and never got a chance for the court to review the case. So now we have this obscure case that suddenly the Supreme Court has agreed to review. And in fact, today, the day after Thanksgiving, is the first day that they could actually look at or do something on it. Now, they could take weeks or months to do anything on it. But the clock's ticking right now. And what's this case all about? This is a big deal. Pay attention. The case is brought by a person in Utah, and it says that on January 6th, over 100 members of Congress, January 6, 2021, after the 2020 election. It's not over yet. On January 6th, when Congress voted to certify the electors who came in from the various states and said that Joe Biden won the presidency. When they did that in defiance of the law, where if there were valid challenges to the veracity of the vote, that it was conducted fairly, etc. At the congressional level, by the way, that they were required to take a 10-day pause and review the information before proceeding with the vote, and that Congress did not delay for 10 days to look for, determine whether or not that was valid information. So when Congress voted to certify the vote on January 6th, they did so in violation of their legal obligation to verify that there'd been no fraud, that there'd been no interference in the election that could have put somebody into office who was not the lawful victor in the electoral process. And that in this particular case, what is construed is that by not doing the legwork, the investigation to verify that there was no fraud in the election, there was no interference in the election, that the members of Congress who voted to certify the election were actually engaged in an act of treason. Now, why would it be treason over a vote? Because if there was information that existed that showed that the vote was interfered with by a foreign enemy, that's an act of war. Now, we know that Director of National Intelligence, Radcliffe, who was the head of the 17 agencies of Homeland Security that were charged in the executive order by President Trump on September 12th, 2018, where Director of National Intelligence was ordered to use all available investigative tools and agencies and agency assets of the Homeland Security system, the 17 intelligence agencies. Another number can be good or evil. Why did they choose 17 investigative agencies? Because they want the numbers, by the way. So the Osiris number. Why did they, Radcliffe had all those agencies do the investigation up to and on the date of the election and immediately thereafter, 2020. They had to give a report within 45 days of any federal election based on the executive order. 42 days, number of gods in the Greek Parthenon, 42 days after the election, on December 15th, Radcliffe did interviews in the media and said that he didn't believe they would be able to provide the report timely 3 days later on the 45th day, as required by the executive order, because there was disagreement between the various agency heads over how much weight to give the intelligence information that was gathered from the various agencies concerning Chinese interference in the 2020 election. That weight was all that was in dispute. There was not a question whether China interfered in the 2020 election, only the magnitude of the interference and whether or not it could have caused a different outcome in the election. So Radcliffe couldn't or wouldn't provide an interim report. Now, by law, he was required to provide an interim report. It didn't have to be a final report. And he didn't provide any report on December 18th as required by law. That's why people wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act and have Trump sign it and go after all the people involved and stop them from proceeding with putting Biden into the presidency, because there was a question whether or not he actually won or whether there was fraud involved. So with that in mind, let me just get this done down a little bit.
Juan, was this the Brunson? Somebody sent
Yes.
that to me.
Yes. So
And is he just a private citizen that's just like a
private
concerned
citizen.
citizen?
Private citizen.
Wow.
So now you have to picture Congress without the benefit of any of the intelligence gathering agencies' materials, none of the police reports, if you will, none of the detective investigation from the largest intelligence gathering operation on planet Earth, Homeland Security, 17 intelligence agencies with access to everything. NSA, CIA, FBI, DIA, everybody. They never looked at anything. So the suit contends. And then 100 members of Congress, 32 states, led by Ken Paxton out of Texas, contesting what was going on in 6 states, primarily whether or not there was election fraud. That Congress ignored all of that and proceeded to certify the election. And so the contention in this lawsuit is that this was a treasonous activity on part of Congress to proceed with the vote without determining whether there had been foreign interference. If there was foreign interference, that's an act of war. And anybody who aided our enemies in their act of war against the American electorate would then be a treasonous traitor. So all of the congressional people who did not protect America and the American vote and the Constitution were in violation of their oaths, acting as treasonous traitors against the American people, putting them at risk of capture by an enemy through color of authority in the electoral process, making them our masters in violation of their actual vote. So this lawsuit says that because they didn't protect the vote, didn't protect the American people, those members of Congress and the Senate who voted to proceed with certifying the vote need to be, and this is what's the remedy. They brought a case and then they've told the court, here's the remedy that we have that you need to give us to protect our vote as citizens, to protect the Constitution, to protect us from an attack by a foreign enemy who's on our soil and now occupies America through its political governmental machine. We need you to order that all those treasonous, treacherous traitors be arrested and tried for the treason that they've committed against America by certifying a vote, knowing full well that there was valid challenges to the lawfulness of the way the vote was conducted, to the veracity of the vote. That 100 members of Congress, those 32 states who brought valid concerns and questions, could not just be passed to the side, could not just be ignored. that Congress needed to take 10 days to review those complaints before proceeding. They needed to take 10 days, have real investigations and hearings to verify and protect the vote and protect the American people and the Constitution with a legitimate investigative process. And the fact that they didn't do the investigation means that they didn't protect us. And the only solution then available to us right now is to arrest the treasonous traitors who didn't protect us. And then, because we don't know what the true outcome of the election was that was interfered with, they don't reverse the election. They don't find Trump won the election. No. What they do is they nullify the 2020 election. They find that Trump never conceded the election, that legally, technically, he never was able to pass the baton to the next person. And in a continuity in government type of situation, that if there's a problem with the election, the sitting president remains president until a valid election can be conducted. So he retains the position in a technical sense. He doesn't get reinstituted as a president. It just recognizes that the election was nullified. Biden is no longer president. In fact, he's part of the treasonous operation that took advantage of, benefited by, made gain through a manipulation of the election, falsifying the outcome of the election, and therefore comes within the realm of being a traitor, treasonous, for their treacherous willingness to participate in in benefiting from a fraudulent process vote where we knew there was some kind of interference that affected the outcome. So with that in mind, they would just find the resolution that the court, the remedy that the court would be asked to institute would be to say, Mr. President Trump, we recognize you are actually the continuing president. You're not relieved of duty. Also makes you commander-in-chief, which has been recognized also behind the scenes by that group that is Strategic Command, Cheyenne Mountain, etc. already. He remains commander-in-chief. He is recognized as continuing president pending a new election, a redo of 2020 at the earliest possible moment that it can be safely done, recognizing that all the sitting members of Congress who participated in this treasonous activity, certifying a vote where they didn't do an investigation to protect the American people when there was evidence presented by other members of Congress that we were in danger and that it was an act of war. President Trump would be recognized as the ongoing president. There doesn't have to be a re-swearing. There doesn't have to be any additional vote. No, nothing. Do not pass go. Do not collect the $200. Just put it right back there in the White House. He's the president of the United States, and let's get to work. And then he makes all the decisions on how to go forward to get a new vote, etc. And 300 plus members of Congress go to jail for treason. Members of the Senate go to jail because they voted without protecting the American people on this thing as treasonous traitors. Now, as bizarre, as outlandish, as wild as all of that sounds, and I know how that sounds to say it. Look, when I had my conversation with my friend who's a constitutional law professor at a major university here in America, and initially he looks at me and says, well, the Supreme Court's not taking this case. And he goes, oh my gosh, they did. what in the world is going on here? Why would they take this? I just started this out with the context. Why would the Supreme Court do it? Because if they don't act first, this lame duck Congress, in a matter of weeks, could neuter them, take them out of power, and they'd never get power. It's a Tholian web. If they complete it, for your Star Trek fans, if they complete the Tholian web, neutering the Supreme Court, taking the balance out of our governmental system, judicial, administrative, congressional, if they take one of them out, neutralizing the Supreme Court, taking away their power by legislative action in this tag team with the administration going in there and packing the court, you'll never get the protections in place again as America. And if a treasonous, traitorous act of war by a foreign government is behind the orchestration of all of this to neutralize the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court is in a desperate situation. They look at all these cases, and there's one case that presents the information just right in conspiracy world, bizarro land, and they decide to take the case. And then the result of this isn't years of deliberation. This isn't, stuff that takes months and months for them to decide. If they take months and months, Congress could take action that neutralizes them to go back and unwind what Congress could do in this lame duck session, what the rhino senators with a bunch of liberals could do in this lame duck session could take decades to unwind, a la Roe versus Wade. If the court wants to act and they feel that they're cornered so much that they must act on a dime in an instant, or it's all over. That's the context of why a case like this that would never reach their desks is suddenly pulled out of nowhere as a threat, as a sticky wicket to protect their position and their power. And they, instead of receiving the kill shot in this Esther moment flip reversal of fortune, could take out the Congress and the president and the people around that president that are a direct threat to them.
I'm glad you explained that, because someone actually sent me that, and I had the same thought that there's no way this is going to go through, because it names 388 people, and they're all just listed right there, all in capital letters.
Well, you think about the war behind the scenes. People, in most situations, it's a linear process. You know, these people file a case here, the judges listen to it there, it's set for a court date months in advance. Both sides get to look at the evidence, they'll schmear. It's just a very long plotting process. It just grinds along. The fact that they took this case for review is it's an act out of bizarro land. It's wild. It's crazy. So let's put it this way. If one of the here's a different perspective. One of the other law professors I dealt with, who's also a very good friend, Republican, and also a former U.S. senator. Friend of mine, we discussed this a bit, and both of their opinion was, and these are very close friends, great Americans. I respect their thoughts and opinions, and they're great guys. And they both had the same opinion, which is, well, I think the court took this case to put this matter to rest once and for all. The court can see it, they can listen to it, and they can knife it to death, and it'll never come back. A la Lindsey Graham saying, okay, well, I hope this puts an end to the whole 2020 thing, and we can move on with life now, which is what he said the other day. You know, I hope this 2022 election now is finally put to rest forever, that 2020 is a stolen thing and we're over with, and let's get on with life. So that's their opinion. These aren't riffraff. These are people with real histories, and that's their opinion. They think it's going to amount to nothing. So those people in the audience that are going, oh my gosh, again, we got to listen to this crap again. Give me a break. Are we done with it now? I want to get on to the next thing. What's on football? Who won the World Cup? The reality is they're not completely wrong. There's a very coherent, intelligent side that says, nope, nothing can happen with this. That's, it's more tit for tat, tiddlywinks, bullshit. It's political crap, and ignore it. But you see, here's the flip to that again. Okay. One side makes the case, the other side makes their case, then the other side gets to come back and do rebuttal to rebut anything that was given in the second case. Okay, so here's the rebuttal. If the Supreme Court wanted to knife this issue to death and just let it go, the reality is they didn't need to grab the tar baby at all. All they had to do was ignore it. It was already dead. The 2022 happened. We're moving on. It's accepted. They accept no cases along those lines. They don't want to deal with it. They ignore cases all the time. That's their normal practice. For every case they take, there's 20 they don't even look at. So why would this be any different? Unless they had a point to make. Unless they decided they needed something. See, the Supreme Court, there was this thing a while ago that the Supreme Court's reversed the 2020 election, and all this stuff. I'm going, what kind of bullshit is that? The Supreme Court doesn't make decisions in a vacuum. They only decide on matters that have been brought before them that they have accepted to review. They don't just take stuff on and in the nether, we've seen something and we decide to revisit this case and whatever. No, somebody has to bring something before them and they choose to hear it. So I was trying to stop people from going down that silly, avenue back when. But now here they have accepted something. And they could make some kind of a decision. And by the way, do they then have to have a bunch of debate? Do they have to have a public hearing? Do they need to hear arguments related to the case? The reality is no. The arguments are already in there. They could hear arguments on this, but they don't have to hear arguments on this. And they could make a determination. And then, by the way, because Natter, this is all about national security, right in the case, it talks about this as a matter of national security. That's why when Congress proceeded to certify the vote, they violated national security interests for the United States, for the American people, for the Constitution, and put America at risk of being captured internally by a foreign military operation, an act of war, because trying to subvert another country's election is an act of war. So an act of war took place against America, potentially, and it has to be reacted to as a matter of national security. If that's the case, who would be engaged and how would they be engaged in order to protect America against this act of war? First of all, the president is not relieved of duty, and he's also commander-in-chief. He'd be read in. Supreme Court has found that we've been attacked. An act of war occurred. Treasonous traitors are in our midst. And then that president would be released to have the treasonous traitors arrested, taken into custody, to protect America. And then Congress would be suspended because you don't have a sitting valid congressional situation. You're going to have a revote, and you're going to have to revote the presidency also. And so you've got a real, drama on your hands. And then the president would have to direct the operations for a revote as soon as the situation allowed in order to restore constitutional government in place in the United States. Now, let me just add this, because we've been having these discussions over and over, what's going on, how they're going to do it, Cheyenne Mountain, blah, 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 blah. This is a chess game. Back when we were looking at what was going on in the 2020 and subsequent information we've had since 2020, we know that Nancy Pelosi you're just gonna have to take my word for it. I can't disclose why for this exact moment, but it'll come out eventually. We know that Nancy Pelosi and others in Congress were privy to conversations taking place as early as August of 2020, right up to the election, that they had 4 different, apologize, I can't seem to block these calls in this particular type of a format, apologize. Anyway, that there was 4 different options for January 6th when the vote was going to be certified from the 2020 election. And that if Trump didn't win, they'd do one thing on January 6th. If Trump did win, they'd do something else in there. If there was, depending on how the vote was counted or what happened within various things. So there was 4 different ways that they could proceed with things that they wanted to do on that January 6th date. Once the vote was in, and then it was determined that they'd got this Biden win, et cetera, then that kind of set the course for everything up to January 6th. But a lot of those decisions were contingent on if this happens, or this happens, or this happens, or this happens. And this is the 4 primary ways that they were creating options for the next move. It's like a chess game. Okay, you make a move. Now your opponent has a chance to make any of a half dozen or more moves himself. But until he makes his move, you don't go with your side of the plan because you've got an option. Well, if he moves this, I'm going to go this way. If he moves that, I'm going to go this way. And you've thought through all your various options. So in this challenge and series of challenges related to 2020, because it's not over yet, 2020 can't be let go. This is that red flag that was put in play even before the 2022 vote and all the challenges to the 2022 vote. If in fact this play, which the Supreme Court has now put in play, they've accepted the flag, they've said, oops, hold, we don't care about 2022, here's a red flag. I don't care if the guy got up there and he launched the ball, the flag was down before the ball was hiked on 2022. Pause. We're going back to 2020. Wait a second. The play had started. No, they got in motion, but whatever. It happened before the play got launched off. Now it's going to get reviewed by New York. This is the drama that we're in right now. And if the Supreme Court makes a play, we at the public level may not even know what their decision was until literally a bunch of congressional members disappear off the streets. And, then we get some notice that, this thing has happened. There's this drama and people come unglued. Do we know exactly what's going to happen? Anybody that says they do is full of shit. Even the players involved, whether it's the Supreme Court or congressional people or President Trump or even the guys in Cheyenne Mountain or the guys in Virginia with senior executive service, None of them knows precisely what's going to happen next. They all know what the options are. They all know how it could play out different ways, but they don't know exactly what's going to happen next. And in part because they don't know precisely how the American people will react. But I will tell you this, that more and more of the American people understand something's wrong. The 2022 election has made it even more apparent. Look at what's going on in Arizona. People want to nullify that election and have a do-over because you can't trust the results. And there's no way to unscramble the egg. So, and other states also. If the Supreme Court feels that they're going to be threatened, what is their pull it out of nowhere response to protect themselves that nobody saw coming? You know, this is the hidden gun in the shoe. They pull out at the last possible second to save themselves and the country because nobody else did it. And if it did happen, who actually enforces the repair? It's an act of war. Military.
Juan, do you think all 388 people, this is an honest question, do they all understand what they've done wrong? Are there just idiots? Are there that many idiots that just voted the wrong way? Or are they all knowingly doing this? What's your opinion on that?
I think it would be a stretch to think that even a large percentage of them understand the magnitude of what they participated in. There's a certain momentum. You're in the crowd, you're in the club, we're not going that way. Look, I have really pretty good friends in the legal arena that are very sincere in their belief that the vote in 2020, the vote in 2022 was fair and honest and straightforward and everything. And they think all this is just hyperbole. But oftentimes people are caught up in criminality and they didn't quite understand what they got sucked into. And then somewhere along the way, they get an education and figure it out. But oftentimes they kind of got sucked in. They didn't realize the magnitude of what they were doing or caught up in until all of a sudden, oh my gosh. And, it could very easily be the case here. There was some that absolutely knew. Look, the challenges to all the players, 100 members of Congress were screaming bloody murder. Something's wrong with the vote. 32 attorney generals representing 32 states were screaming bloody murder. Something is wrong in these 6 states, let alone other places in the country. We're, look, 2 million Americans showed up on January 6th. They wanted Congress to slow down and look at the vote. Look at the electors, look at those states, verify before you certify. They didn't show up there to do an insurrection. That's the biggest lie in the history of the world, practically. Okay. And everybody knows that at this point in time. And there's this, this injustice that's being perpetrated on the American people with these charges against these people who showed up to be counted. And yes, it's just like my buddy Travis Evans. He did go into the Capitol. He accepted that he did something he shouldn't have done. He did help to get people back out when he realized that this was really going in the wrong direction. Just this last week, he accepted his sentence for, I think, 30 days or 60 days in jail or something, and then 3 years of probation, because what he did in going into the Capitol was not something that he should have done. So he accepted the consequences of that. But the millions outside the Capitol, excuse me, they didn't go into the building. They just showed up to be counted and wanted Congress to know that they were watching. And that Congress needed to slow down and look for what happened here on the election. And Congress just steamrolled over all of them, and then participated in a mischaracterization of why they were there and what that meant. And even arguably tried to mischaracterize them, because why? Because they were involved in colluding with these globalista, these foreign powers, because they got to be in office. Some of them to a greater extent, others to a lesser extent. But let's say a bank robbery takes place. Well, the guy's in the bank with the machine gun pointed at the poor little teller girl. And others are there pointing their guns at the patrons inside the bank. And there's one out in the getaway car. Well, he didn't do anything near as serious. He was just driving the getaway car. And then something happens and the security guard tries to stop everything and they kill him. But the guy in the getaway car, he wasn't in the bank. He didn't know what's going on. He's just driving the getaway car. When it comes time, when we arrest them all, the guy in the getaway car gets charged as an accessory to murder. Why? Because he was part of the overall crime. It wouldn't have happened without his help and participation. So he is as guilty for the death of the security guard in the eyes of the law as the guy that pulled the trigger, because he facilitated this whole thing. All those members of Congress who participated, what if just another dozen or two had joined the 100 in saying, whoa, stop, hold on? What if just one person, Vice President Pence, had said, whoa, stop, I got it, but you know what, you guys? We got to take a little moment here. Let's take 10 days. Let's review what's here. Send the electors back and let's start reviewing the material. Make sure that there's no foreign interference. And oh, by the way, let's get an interim intelligence report from Director of National Intelligence, Radcliffe, so we know what the hell actually is going on here. Let's actually go get the police reports and try to figure out what's happening here. Let's take a pause. That's all this suit is saying. Take a pause and get to the facts of the matter before you do something that could endanger all of America to being captured and controlled by a foreign enemy. Spectre, the mob, the cartels. Do you realize what's really going on here? America is under attack by criminal cartels that are actually being used as arms on the octopus by a foreign power. That foreign power is China. China is controlling the mobs of Mexico. And those mobs are bringing in fentanyl to America. And they're killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, destroying people's lives. They're using the fentanyl attack to undermine our youth and destroy a whole generation from the inside out, to so weaken the foundation of America that it's drilling holes in the foundation of America, our youth. And eventually it's so porous with holes being drilled in the foundation that the whole building, the whole republic could collapse in on itself. And China's doing that. It's no accident. It's a very precise, intelligent act. And the cartels are in it, the mob, the criminals, because they're getting benefit. They're making huge money. And they're using the cover of bringing all of these illegals into the country so that once the electoral system is captured far enough, we'll have so many foreigners who are beholden to the people that got them in here and protected them that the existing citizenry can't resist the attack. We're under invasion. And we're being captured one illegal at a time. We're being captured through the loss of one area of strength, one teenager, one young adult at a time as they die away. We're being attacked within our youth. The devil himself is attacking us to take out the foundations of America. How do you bring down great big huge buildings? Why is it we don't believe the narrative on 9/11? Because we see that the internal steel structure could not have come down as they show it to us. It was a controlled demolition, like all controlled demolitions, where we take down the structure. We take out the key strategic connections, that the framework of the building. And then we blast the rest of the skeletal area of the building, and the whole thing falls in on itself. No steel frame building prior to the Twin Towers and Building 7 had ever collapsed in a fire until then in the history of the world. That's why architects and engineers for 9/11 truth keep screaming from the top of their lungs. Didn't happen the way you're told. Couldn't possibly have happened the way you're told. We're being sold a narrative to somebody else's advantage. America is having its foundation drilled out, made porous, one act at a time, one death at a time, one immigrant at a time. And now the big blast that brings the whole building down is the capturing of our political system, the completion of the mission by neutralizing, neutering, destroying the last checkpoint at the Supreme Court, because Congress is captured, bought and paid for. The administration is captured, bought and paid for. Most all of the judicial system, you can't get to justice at the Justice Department. And the last thread with authority to act before it's all military is the Supreme Court. And realizing they're cornered, they're about to lose all power, the last hope, they've got one thin thread, a handful of conservatives inside the Supreme Court with the guts to do Roe versus Wade, has one instant, one moment to save their life, save America's life. And that is this bizarre action they pulled out of nowhere and now are considering for review. And when they act on it, they don't have to have a public discussion. It's just an up or down. Is this true? Is this what the law required? We find that that's true. They make a couple of calls, issue a couple of things to the right people, and the rest of it happens relatively automatically. You arrest Congress, you arrest a bunch of senators, so the world's going to change in an instant. Could it happen, and how soon would it happen? Oh my God. Will it happen? Guess it's as good as mine.
It is very cool how all the facts are just like, it's public knowledge. So they don't have to, there's, like you said, there's nothing they need to do. They did it. We all know it.
Well, and then imagine this. That's why I love this art.
The Matador.
Who has the sword to kill the deep state bull? If the Supreme Court did this, they would be empowering the Matador to go take on the deep state bull. And the next move, that's the kill shot. And by the way, in card playing, the trump card, which is the ace of spades, the trump card is also known as the Matador. And what is the Matador? The Matador kills the game. These games that have been being played against us, the Matador comes in and delivers the kill shot. Question is, when's that possible? When does it happen? When could the Supreme Court take action? It's sitting there. What if you're Congress and you think that this is that okay corral moment? You're about to have a shootout. What would you do as Congress? Would you maybe arrest that guy before he can arrest you? What's at stake? Everything. If you can get him first or he can get you first, who gets the first kill shot off? Who has time to get out of the way or doesn't have time to get out of the way? Man, this is as wild as it gets. It's as wild as it gets.
Juan, I noticed the numbers too in that, because I noticed them like Tom does. I don't know what they mean specifically, but the number was 18, 11, 47. You just brought up the number 11. You've talked extensively about the number 47. So I don't know what it means. I don't know who put that number out there, or if it was just random, but I noticed it.
Well, 18 is a fun number. And somewhere in here, we'll have to have a longer conversation on that. That doesn't come into play for a bit. So that would be at a later place in the game, but we'll have some fun with it when the time comes.
One of the talking of chess and possible moves, and depending on what they do, depends on the next move we make. One thing that I heard that came out just a couple of days after Tuesday, November 15th, was that the possibility of President Trump becoming the Speaker of the House. And
bullshit! It's not happening.
Okay, so that's not the case then, yeah.
No, it's a fun conversation, but that's that's not the game we're playing here.
Okay, is that technically possible though? It might not be might not be a move that they want to take, but would that
it's technically possible, but they would neutralize it probably with an arrest and other stuff, and it's a longer game that is probably just it's fun. Look, there's options from both sides. That's floated out there as an option. Is it impossible? No. Is it a likely option to be played? There's always feints. There's always, you just had the World Cup or the soccer game. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about that soccer game is you watch soccer players. I coached 2 teams that took state championships years ago, a long time ago. And kids teams, okay, youth teams. And one of the most important things you're teaching kids the whole time is how to look like you're going one way and you go the other, so that the other player has to commit his energy going one direction. And so you're trying to train them how to make the body appear to be going one way, but you're actually moving energy in the hips and the legs a different direction. You're drawing their eyes to one area of your body so that they react to where their eyes are looking. And that's where you're looking at the other player. You have to see, is he watching your legs or is he watching your shoulders? If he's watching your shoulders, you're doing stuff with your legs that put the momentum in a particular direction, and you're feinting the other way with your shoulders, and then you're twisting to move faster than he can react to you. It's a feint. So if you float out there something where they take a lot of energy to counteract it, Trump's going to be Speaker of the House, he's trying to make that play happen. If you can pull them off on the direction there, and they waste time and motion to get in checkmate position for that, all of a sudden the ball's going a different direction. Or if you can pass the ball to somebody else at a convenient moment while they're trying to challenge you in that direct shot, or pass it back and somebody else is going in a different direction, it distracts and blocks their energy while somebody else can get around them and get to the next position. So that's all part of this feints and plays that are in play. we're in a wartime situation. Trying to get the enemy to think you're doing one thing and you're actually doing something else is part of the whole game of war. I mean, yeah, we're landing at Calais. Obviously, even the sorcerers, the fortune tellers who've been right all the time, they've always been right, are telling Hitler, no, it's Calais, it's Calais, it's Calais. Oh yeah, by the way, they were double, triple agents working for us. And they gave him lots of verified information numerous times till the one time it really mattered, it was the wrong information. Building their confidence level up so you could get them to believe you until that one moment that was really critical and they believed the wrong thing. We're watching nation state level challenges. If we were attacked in an act of war, a nation state level attack on America's vote, do we want to convey to our enemy what we're about to do to their frontline forces in Congress and how we're going to react to that? Do we want them to think that the challenge is on the Speaker of the House, or do we want them to see other stuff? And by the way, there's stuff in play without giving any of the main stuff away. We've located several of the Chinese officers, military intelligence officers working for PLA inside the United States, not the Palestinian Liberation Army. The Chinese military with their personnel, be like our CIA officers. And then the agents, the internal operatives working for Chinese intelligence and military inside the United States to do things inside our vote system. We got them. You watch. They have been engaged in an act of war against the American people. And as that becomes public knowledge, you're going to see how they were coordinating their actions with business, mobsters, and crime syndicate, cartel, mobsters. You have a business crime family, a political crime family, and a cartel crime family inside and outside the United States, coordinating their actions in a Spectre-type James Bond movie scenario to create corridors and pathways to take control of whole large swaths of America, including the Southwest, through Arizona and New Mexico and Nevada, tied into the cartels out of Mexico and South America, with the child trafficking, with the fentanyl, with the human trafficking into America to drill out the foundations of America, going back way before Fast and Furious. You have other similar things going into the economy. Look, this FTX thing. Let's go back. The reason that I paused on the McAfee stuff, and I have this beautiful, I got a jacket like this one, but it's a McAfee jacket. The other one's awesome. So this one, I have a great time in the stores and like that, and the restaurants, because so many people love. But if I'm super liberal areas, I wear my McAfee jacket. Nobody gets offended by it. And that McAfee art's awesome. And so if you've seen it with the burn, which is the swacked thing, the slow burn on the cigarette, what's going on in the cryptos? The bad guys were going to use the cryptos to fund all of their bullshit into the American political scene. FTX was going to become the clearinghouse for consolidating all the cryptos. Remember, even years ago, people in this audience will remember that have heard me for a while. I said in the crypto world, they were going to do something similar to what happened in the credit card and bank machine stuff. You go to a bank machine 20, 30 years ago, and you'd have to look in the back of your card, and there'd be Accel and Discover and various things and Visa and MasterCard. And you'd put your bank card in the machine, and banks had overlapping relationships for how to clear these transactions. And so you could have your bank account at one bank, but if another bank had an Accel clearing system, you could get money out of a bank machine from a different company bank, but they had this commonality. So you'd look on your card and see if any of the, 8, 10 companies that are on your card are on the bank machine. You could get money out of it. So what happened is that those got resolved down, and now you don't look at that anymore because they're all kind of in one little group. Tied back to the Visa, MasterCard, Discover stuff. So what FTX was trying to do was essentially become a clearinghouse for all the various cryptos, kind of like a New York Stock Exchange of cryptos, and handle resolution of trades between these various ones, almost like currency exchanges and things like that. And what they were really doing is, like the money that went into Ukraine, the Ukrainian government's investing in FTX. They get money to, handle the war and buy munitions and missiles and tanks and everything else. But if they're not going to spend it that day, they don't want just money sitting in a box in a bank. They got to get a good return on it. So they invested the money in companies like FTX. And then FTX, because they're allowed to make investments and support political stuff like that. Well, they would make donations to groups that could help them get the legislation through that allows them to, get the laws passed that allow them to take control of the crypto market. So they were donating to the political groups that were the most advantageous for them to get the laws that allowed them to take over the crypto world, which were what? Democratic organizations. So they take money from the US government, give it to Ukraine, supposedly to purchase arms, to defend themselves against Russia. They can't get the arms today or tomorrow. They got to order them. It's going to take time. They got to have the money somewhere. So they invest it in various things, and then they also make donations to political groups that will help them to secure their position to choke down the crypto market. And it just so happens to be Democratic groups back here in the US. It's American government money supporting the Democrats. That was going to do great. The cryptos were doing fantastic. They're going to make a lot of money. Everybody's going to make big bucks. All of a sudden, they realize that in the McAfee world, there's this little threat. When they get to 400 million shares of the whacked operation, the leaks start coming out like WikiLeaks of 32 terabytes of information that McAfee has that go into the child trafficking and the criminality of the various groups, aimed primarily, by the way, at Democrats, but also a bunch of rhinos. And remember, where was McAfee at? He's out there filming Jeffrey Epstein's island with his drone. He's out there running around the Mediterranean, right? I should say the Bahamas, looking at all this stuff. And the Mediterranean's over by, Turkey, Libya, Italy, all that. The Bahamas here off the coast of the U.S. And he's looking at Jeffrey Epstein's island, and he's all pissed off, and he's got this information from inside the system. He's going after the political people who went after him. So this is all going to start coming out when the cryptos reach a certain sales volume. And when these guys realized, oh shit, this might actually be true, they have to be careful, and they have to slow down what they're doing. And in fact, when they slow down the crypto world and start cutting off these sales to slow it down while they're trying to figure it out, what did they do? They collapsed FTX. FTX needed the volume, needed the ever increasing prices to stay viable. As soon as they slowed down the crypto stuff, they took out their key member. They were in a catch-22. If they proceeded, McAfee was going to get them. If they cut the prices, FTX fails. And all of a sudden, there's evil schemes. Well, they might have thought that it would take longer to fail than it did, and they'd have more time to cover it up. But in the course of failing, it drew attention. Who was involved? Where's the money coming from? Who were they donating to? Look, they were giving more money to the Democrats than Soros was. And where did the money originate? The U.S. government. And who authorized the payments over to them? American representatives and senators out of our Congress, the administration, the president authorized all these payments. What were they really doing? They were funding their own campaigns to keep control of America. What's the Supreme Court going after? Oh my gosh, it's a foreign operation taking over America. We got one shot to block them all. So McAfee's in there, Trump's in there, all these things that I've been talking about all along. There's aspects of it all through this whole thing. It's all coming to a head right now. It's amazing. Let's see what happens. I have no idea precisely what happens next, but I can tell you dramas are afoot.
Juan, do you think so the bit that we spoke about with Ogden, do you think that possibly could be a feint as well, because we're talking about it and it's public? And
well, I don't think the Supreme Court is playing around. They're in a desperate moment. Those judges that did Roe versus Wade and some of the other rulings they've had this year, they know they're in a really precarious situation. So, did they do this on a LARP? Did they want this trouble by accepting this case? They could have just ignored it. Why wouldn't they just ignore it? That's why my buddy, when I was talking on this, that is my constitutional professor, major university, not riffraff. When he saw this, and all of a sudden he realized, wait a second, no, they didn't need to do this. They did it for a reason. What could that reason be? And as they got into it deeper, he realized, oh my gosh, talk about a chess move that nobody saw coming, or from a quarter. Most people think that the Supreme Court's a captured operation also. Well, why'd they do Roe versus Wade? Who are they fighting? And during a Democrat run thing that's, administration and Congress that are the exact opposite on their viewpoints from what the Supreme Court just ruled on. They're in an adversarial political environment and yet came to this decision in the midst of that very adversarial environment, taking on this case. Man, it's like wild. And then even looking at it from the 17th letter conversation, does it fit into some of those themes that we've talked about for 5+ years? Yes. Literally, one fell swoop, you could bring down the whole house. It's a killer move. By the way, the brand on the bull is DS, Deep State. I love it. I enjoy it. I wore this jacket the other day. I was over in Palm Beach after the president's speech over Mar-a-Lago. So I wear this jacket. I wore a regular jacket. I should have worn this jacket, but I wore a regular jacket to the actual speech by the president. And but a bunch of us had dinner at an Italian restaurant there. It was a great thing. We had 15 people or something there, and people were coming from all over the restaurant to see the jacket because it makes such a statement. And people wanted, it's just so fun because it is really this moment. Is there any prayer? You could go down the street, you could talk to everybody, you could call every relative you got right now and say, hey, did you know that 2020 might still be in play? They'd all laugh at you. You probably could literally in this audience even, if I polled every person in this audience before I started the show minutes ago, if I just said, how many of you think that 2020 could still be in play at this moment in time? I bet you that the real number might be, a high number might be 1 in 100. It's probably more like 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,000 would have agreed with me that 2020 is still in play. They'd have said, that is the ultimate hopium. I'm done. It's over with. I don't even have that conversation anymore. I'm embarrassed by it. I hate it. You've, let us out on a string. Trump's let us out on a string. I'm not even going to waste time in that conversation. But after what I just explained to you, is it that wild or bizarre? Congress is going on the attack on the Supreme Court. The administration has made statements that make it sound like they might go after the Supreme Court in an attack. The Supreme Court has one defensive move that they've figured out they can do. Maybe they've got others we haven't thought of. Maybe they're not going to move at all. Maybe they're all captured and they could care less and they're going to let them be neutered and move on and have packed court. Maybe they don't care and it doesn't matter. I don't know. But if there was a move that wasn't seen coming that could flip the table and do everything that 17th letter alluded to all the way along. Even Trump himself, when he did his speech the other day, under his breath, President 2020, he's still taunting and teasing. And that's part of the Matador theme. Are they coming after him to arrest him? Could be. Even if they did arrest him, what if the Supreme Court waited? What if they waited days, weeks, even months? I don't know. Maybe the Supreme Court takes action and does what it's going to do on the legislation, but the legislation wouldn't come into play for, months potentially. Maybe the president's action packing the court doesn't come into play for months. So maybe the Supreme Court delays until after the first of the year to do something. But they look at this case, they've got it there. It's a threat. It's like moves on the chessboard. You move pieces into position and they're ready to make a play depending on what the other side does. And now the other side makes its play and you could have Trump under arrest. And Congress has decided to do it. And they pull this ace out of the hole at the Supreme Court level. If they go to that level, it could be weeks. It could be months down the road that Congress says enough. The Supreme Court says enough, pulls this out of nowhere. Next thing you know, you got the Marines going and grabbing people out of Congress, putting them in cuffs and dragging them off Gitmo. So does anybody know exactly what's going to happen next? None of the players involved know precisely. They just know they've all got options, and the Supreme Court just brought a new option into play in this 5D chess game.
Juan, something that President Trump said at the at Mar-a-Lago, you were there. If you watch President Trump's, if you watch the broadcast on Rumble on his channel, you'll have maybe 2 or 3, 4 minutes tops of kind of just announcing that it's about to start, and then 3 or 4 minutes in, he comes out. So around the 15-minute mark, 15 minutes 30, he talks about his administration not going into any wars for decades and decades. And I don't think that was a deliberate misspeak from him. Any thoughts on what he's actually talking about? Because we know on the surface he's been president since 2016 and now behind the scenes, etc. So that's 6 years. So what's he mean about him being president in his administration not going to wars for decades and decades.
Well, again, I mean, you're looking in a future tense. There's certainly ways to interpret that, and sometimes
he's talking about. He was making reference to it being in the past, though. He's saying that we haven't gone into a war for decades and decades under my administration.
Well, if you look at what he's saying, he's doing a layered response. Part of the deal is this: Trump was invited to run. Who invited him? And so within that context and the White Dove Society, there's things in play that the public has not seen, understood, grasped yet, that in the time to come will be reviewed and looked at and reconsidered the rest of our lives. How much were you told right to your face, but because you didn't have the context, you didn't have the depth, you couldn't fully grasp it? Students will be re-looking at this and understanding that there was levels to the conversations, people being spoken to that you didn't even realize were in the room. When Trump, when he does his language of semaphore, the flags, the communications, before I explained this to people who even knew that every dress Melania wore was part of a coded communication. And it's not the only code that Trump has been using in his communications. He uses words very precisely. Covfefe, okay? The way he handles the Fiji water. He is amazing in the way he can, with exacting precision, surgical precision, engineer a phrase or a term to precisely say what he ultimately means to a very private audience in plain sight. While you thought he was talking to you, he was talking to people behind you on the other side of the room, on the other side of the glass, because he's having a global conversation with Spectre. This is a James Bond movie, a bad one at that, but it's a James Bond movie because there's all different crime families involved here. Criminal, political, judicial, nation-state level, wars, militaries, intelligence agencies, bloodline families, royalty. There's so many different aspects here. And he's talking to all of them and has been all along. But he's not talking solely for himself. Trump himself is being used as a tool of communication by those who invited him to run. He's not operating in a vacuum. It's much bigger than him. That's where people that, they get into Trump derangement syndrome. They hate Trump. They don't want anything to do with Trump. They do not grasp. He himself is the visible side of a much larger iceberg, working in plain sight to recapture control of America at this hinge moment in the history of the world. You're watching something so grand, so vast in its magnificence, to recapture control of America as the wedge point to recapturing control of the world from this globalista crowd who's trying to take us under forever into this satanic Luciferian control. And it's that big of a game. It's that huge. And if you don't see it, I understand. It's hard to grasp in those kind of levels. This is a fight for planet Earth. It goes all the way back to Cain versus Abel. Who's going to win this? It's the same fight. It's the same monsters. Same things at stake.
What and who are the White Dove Society? Juan?
Not a conversation for today.
Have you ever mentioned that name before?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Juan, I think you must be talking to the same people I've been talking to, because you mentioned Trenis, and you talked about fentanyl and all of this. And I don't know. I am working with the new George Online magazine. So I have to put my plug out
Gene,
there.
yeah, great guy.
So Laura
George
Logan
Online
actually,
126, 107, that one?
yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
Yeah.
Laura Logan actually wrote an incredible article about the fentanyl and China and everything you just mentioned. And that's going in the next issue that's supposed to be coming out hopefully within the next week or so. And then next month, Trenis will be helping me and Laura and a bunch of other people write a really moving piece about J6. So if anybody's listening and is interested, georgeonline.com is where you can find those.
Yeah, no, Laura's been doing fantastic work. She's on the front lines down there in Texas. I just hat tip to her. We've discussed this stuff numerous times. She's got great sources available to her where she's at. She just spoke out in Houston at another event that another friend of ours put up, looking at the border issue. And she knows it as well as anybody out there. The horrors of what's going on the border are unbelievable. My other buddy, Chris Burgard, he just had a film that was aired, shown at private screening at Mar-a-Lago here a few weeks back. They invited me to come, but I had other stuff on the schedule I couldn't not do. But a super film. There's a lot of projects that are in the pipeline, even on the border thing. It is, which attack on America is the worst? Is it the attack on the vote, or is it the attack on the illegals coming over the border? Is it the attack by the drugs? Is it the diversion of our military capabilities and assets into conflicts in Eastern Europe or the Mideast or South America or Asia? Is it the coming financial crises with this crypto play and metals? Is it, the treason from within by a Congress who wouldn't protect us from an attempt to steal our votes and put leaders over us that we didn't actually vote for? What's the greatest threat to America? Ultimately, my read is different than probably most. The actual threat to America is that specter, the devil himself, Lucifer, through all of his minions, has got enough of a grip on America that we get choked out by any number of those. Any one of those is enough to cripple America. The combination is a knockout punch. And if the American people lose consciousness, the air gets sucked out of the room. When a python, when a constrictor snake has you in its grip, it doesn't just bite your head off. It doesn't just eat you. It chokes the life out of you, chokes the breath out of you. You can't get air in. It collapses the rib cage. You can't expand the lungs. It constricts around you till you can't breathe. And then when you've breathed your last, then it consumes you. We're in the grip of a constrictor snake as a people, as a country. And all of these things are choking the life out of us from all these different directions. And when we've breathed our last, that's when it swallows us alive. So we need to understand that just attacking the border issue, just attacking the drug issue or the human trafficking, even the corruption in Congress, any one of those by itself doesn't save America. What we actually need is some kind of divine intervention, but for an act of God, but for the American people suddenly realizing that all of this is about us not looking to our creator, because what's ultimately at stake? Planet Earth. To destroy the children of Adam and to put in the children of Lucifer, the devil, to own the planet. And so we as a Christian nation, or at the very least, an Abrahamic nation primarily, the three religions, Muslim, Judaism, Christianity, if we lose our way, that the devil owns the rest of the world. We're the only one that's a choke point, stopping a lot of this Luciferian activity across the world. The United Nations, created with the Lucis Trust money, a Luciferian organization. It's not for the good of mankind, it's for the good of the Luciferian kind. Most people don't see it that way, they don't understand it, but enough do. If we're to be saved with as much against us as there is, it will be an act of God. But what would that act of God look like? What would an act of God to save America look like? I think this scenario is one of the possibilities related to something the Supreme Court would do. Supreme Court broke this principality's wings, knocked its feet out from underneath him and crushed it in Dallas at Roe versus Wade. The dark angel's wings across America are broken. Is it still got areas where it's got influence over America, et cetera? Yeah, it does. But that was a dark angel over America. The Supreme Court is the one that took the action that took that energy out of the devil himself. It was an act of God as far as I'm concerned, and people saw that. It was this first crack in the stone. Could this same Supreme Court take and break the wings of another dark angel over America with this crooked vote, with this Congress that's not protecting the American people based on the Constitution, to capture a grip? It would be an act of God, as far as I'm concerned, on behalf of his people to somehow put that Congress in check. That Congress that once, why are they attacking the Supreme Court? Over Roe versus Wade. Congress wants to nip this court in the bud because of how they acted on Roe versus Wade. A life course for America, choosing life over death. Would God protect that court and protect America from these bloodthirsty, murderous, treasonous traitors working a Luciferian scheme to capture America and enslave it forever? I believe God would hear the pleas of his people and do just that. How many people showed up and praised God in heaven for overturning Roe versus Wade. Wasn't perfect because it didn't get all the way down to the state level, but many states had already done work in advance. I believe God himself is on the move. And part of being on the move is to take action to nullify, to neuter this Congress and those treasonous members of the Senate and this treasonous administration that is in the grip of, under the control of foreign entities, channeling our money back into our political system to be used against us through foreign operations. I believe it's an act of God. It's the way God would work. It's on the right grounds because it ultimately relates back to Roe versus Wade and what this Supreme Court did to then protect that position with a chess move that protects those pieces on the board while preparing for the next phase of the attacks.
Juan, I feel like I ask you this every time I have the opportunity to be on screen with you, but what percentage are we at with Americans who are awake now?
We're at 80+% and have been now solidly for about 3.5 weeks.
Okay. That's good.
You have to get to 85.
We don't need 85. We needed 80+%. We're at 80+. You can have spikes that go further. You may get a drop here or there. You have to be at 80+%. We're solidly there and consolidating that position and have been for weeks.
That's great news.
Doesn't mean that we're not, look, is this a cakewalk? Are you kidding me? There's so many bends and twists in this thing. You're talking about control of the big dog on the planet. You're talking about a fight with the biggest snake that ever existed, the machine. They just going to roll over and give up? I mean, this is this unbelievable epic battle that's about to take place. This is the Matador versus the deep state bull. Don't kid yourself. We're in a hell of a fight. And is the outcome absolutely determined? If it was absolutely determined, where would be the need to have the rest of the fight? There's a lot of play left in that monster. That's why I enjoy wearing my jacket, because it's a statement piece. It's clear which side I'm on. 2020, it's not over yet.
Juan, you missed your calling. You should have been a singer.
I was at one time, but I don't know that I was ever going to be anything, world class. Let's put it that way. But I do enjoy this drama that we're in. Everybody here in this audience, this is a unique audience. I hope I can say something that I wouldn't necessarily say with some other audiences. Look, if you're still here, you're probably fall in the category of pretty close to a true believer. You put up with a lot of arrows. You took a lot of hits. You're pretty banged up and bruised to still be in the fight right now. Against all external information from most of the people around you, you're holding a line in spite of the fact that everything tells you it's over, we're done, we haven't done. And yet in your gut, somewhere in your being, you still know there's a still small voice somewhere. Yeah, but it just, no. God himself will not let us lose. We just have to keep the faith. We have to hold on. We have to hang in there. And the devil is whispering in your ear, give up. It's just like Job. Curse God and die. All of Job's buddies, curse God and die. Job's wife tells him to curse God and die. Don't you realize God's forsaken you? And even in the fight at this exact moment, is the fight over if the Matador gets arrested? What further things? Look, I'm telling you, there's still a Cuban Missile Crisis type event that has to happen before it's all done. Trump himself made a bizarre statement the other day. He said, what if we had a nuclear thing in 6 months? What would that look like? Well, was he giving you a hint that 6 months from now we're going to have a nuclear thing? Is that something that's coming, 7 days in May type event? What if Congress gets taken out and then senior executive service is still enough in play that they come in and make challenges to a new administration? Taking Congress out and taking out part of the Senate doesn't take out senior executive service. They're still in play, hiding in their bunkers, doing their mischief. So we have long months of drama, even in what might otherwise be considered a perfect world. Trump's back. We're going to have elections. We're going to get this under control. More bends and twists than anybody ever conceived of. A near-death experience for America. I asked Nino to do the interview the other day with the gentleman who had the near-death experience and wrote his book. And he did. And that's a very important interview. I hope everybody goes and listens to it. Near-death experiences, most of them are pretty unique to the person. There's some commonality, and yet they're also, there's little tinges of different things. What's America's near-death experience going to look like? We're not there yet. Even things like this don't necessarily get us to that precise moment. And in a near-death experience, your body has stopped. Your heart's not beating. Your lungs aren't moving. Your spirit has left the body, and you see the future of where you're headed, except for some act of God to bring you back. And in a hellish experience, sometimes you have a heavenly, where somebody goes and sees what heaven's like and anything else. And sometimes people have a hellish experience. And when they do, the horrors, the drama, and they come back and they're changed forever, and they want to change their life. That's what's coming for America. And it's going to be epic, gripping, hard to comprehend right now, but that's what I believe is still ahead for us as a country. So we have, from a prayer standpoint, from a God standpoint, we have a fight yet to be done, that people of faith, the people in this audience, the true believers, will be refined in going through and must go through, so that on the far side of it, we're hardened to a level tougher than titanium and prepared for the rest of the battle. Right now, it's re-winning the ship of state, re-owning our land, our country, and then going out to help the rest of the world, because this monster is global. And not being like these people, our brother's keeper, but going out to help the rest of the world, being our brother's brother, and recapture the world for the children of Adam, whom God promised it to, and not the children of the serpent, which is what the real game is moving forward.
Very good. Thank you, Juan.
I don't have anything else, Tom. If you do, I appreciate your time, Juan. That was awesome. A lot of good information.
I always enjoy talking with your audience. I hope that, some of it's repetitive. I hope this was new for folks. This is a critical moment. I appreciate that people take the time to let me do these longer discussions. And there's so many of them, just give me the detail, just give me the detail, just give me the detail. And some of it's a longer discussion. So when I have an audience like yours, where we can at least do this exercise, this mind thought development, and look at the possibilities and what things mean, everybody get a grip. There's a lot of bends and twists ahead. I'm giving you some of the options how this could play out. What exactly is going to happen next? Oh my gosh, who knows? So let's be in prayer. In fact, let me just say a quick prayer with the audience real quick. Father God, in all of these things, there's plans of men, there's our understandings of things, but we commit our plans to you, Father God. Even the actions of Supreme Court justices and others who are looking to you for divine guidance, assistance. We ask you to give clarity of thought and purpose to those in these decision-making positions, that you would direct their actions on our behalf according to your will. And that in America, freedom and right thinking, right living will be protected and preserved. We thank you for those justices who voted in the way they did on Roe versus Wade to create a new option for America, a new future for America, out from under this dark cloud of death and murder. We ask you to give them clarity of purpose and the manner in which they execute these next actions, so that the vote of the American people is in fact honored and protected, and that constitutional authorities are restored in America according to the designs put in place by our founders. We ask you for provision to get through the times ahead in these moments of drama. We ask you for angelic assistance at the key choke points where there may be fights and battles, angelic protection for the players so that they cannot have any harm come their way while they do your will. We ask that your will be done to protect America, to protect the Constitution that you've given us, and this way forward, so that we can then go forward as a restored republic to do your will in the whole earth, to protect liberty, to protect justice, to protect rightness, to protect the opportunity to worship you as the pilgrims asked for and were given in coming to this country, that you protect our ability to worship you and do your will in the earth as you gave it to us in the first Adam and again in the second Adam. In Jesus' name, by the blood of Christ, thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Always love you guys. And by the way, a brief commercial interruption. Go over to thejennifermac.com. You can get the jacket. She's actually, I think, got a special there for people that are a little more well-heeled and want the big canvas where there's a jacket that they get the jacket thrown in with the canvas if they're buying a canvas right now. And so it's a pretty good deal. And go have some fun. Be counted in this moment. And then you don't have to buy something expensive. There's refrigerator magnets. The refrigerator magnets, a blast. There's a lot of fun stuff there. Why? Because when people come to your house, they're around you. It makes a statement, and it also provides a point of conversation. We need our relatives, our friends, our business acquaintances like that. These are conversations that must be had right now. And as some of these things play out, bizarre things that nobody saw coming. You're now a very educated audience. At least you know what some of this may possibly mean, what some of the ramifications are. Put little triggers out there that become points of contact that you can have some fun with. This is fun. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be afraid of it. I've not had one negative comment so far. I'm sure it's coming, but I haven't had a negative comment because it's just so fun and so playful. The El Matador.
Did you come up with that, or did Jennifer come up with Matador?
Well, I had actually done a bunch of presentations and talked about this with Trump being the Matador, the Matador, and the Trump card and like that. And so, and this whole MAGA thing, we're under attack as MAGA, make America great again. Well, that's the guy. So anyway, my voice is almost gone. Love y'all. I think there's a special going to be over at gumroad.com too, for those that have already ordered a book previously. Special deal for them. So that and the jennifermac.com. Go have some fun.
Thanks, Juan.
Get some rest, Juan. Feel better.
All right.
Thanks, Juan.
Folks.
Love you. Take care.
Bye.
And go to Rachel's channel. The link will be below. Right Side Blonde, and then subscribe to the Tom Number Show and Psych Club and all the other channels. Thanks, Juan. God bless. Thanks, Rachel.
All right, thanks, folks.
See you soon. Take care. Bye.